Well, Antjuan Seawright, thank you so much for joining us here on the Switch Up, your Switch Up debut. We're so excited.
Look, it's so good to be here. What a time to be alive, in the words of that modern day hip hop philosopher Drake.
Yes. I feel like things are definitely alive and moving right now. We are so close to election day. Just tell me a little bit about how you're feeling right now.
Well, I'm always cautiously optimistic because I think everyone understands the consequences of this election. I've been guilty of traveling this country throughout my career of saying this is the most important election of our lifetime. I've said that cycle after cycle. And it's been the biggest lie I've ever told, because every election is important. But this election by far is the most consequential of our lifetime, because the consequences of this election perhaps will linger for the next 50 to 60 to even 100 years. And I keep saying this every time I'm traveling across the country. Black folks are casting a survival vote in this election, because whomever has policy decision making power after November 5th will have a large say so in whether or not communities that look like mine or the ones I grew up in live or die, not just survive or thrive, but literally live or die.
And I want to touch on that a little bit because I think as you said, we constantly hear how each election is so important. And obviously, we have seen some changes this election cycle. We went from having former President Trump, President Biden, to was it like 100 days outside of the election that switched up to former President Trump, Vice President Harris. The vice president once again making history. She has made history many times throughout her career. Talk to me a little bit about if you've seen any sort of shift in the way Black voters, especially, are looking at this year's election with the ticket change.
Oh, I think the tectonic plates in the country have shifted, not just with Black voters, but I think with every other constituency that falls up under the eligible voting population in this country. I jokingly say, but in a serious note, that Kamala Harris has brought more power and electricity to this process than the power company itself. She's been able to consolidate the base. She's been able to expand the map and the math. What was once uncertain ground has all of a sudden become fertile ground, and she's raised a record amount of money, which we all know is important and pivotal down the stretch, with a record number of eligible African American voters in this election, 34.4 million, according to Pew Research. That's a 7% increase from the 2020 election. Black folks and Black voters have a once in a lifetime opportunity to make history with a once in a generation candidate. So the power and history is literally in our hands. And so you see thousands of Black women organizing on Zoom calls. You see thousands of Black men organizers on Zoom calls. You see coalitions and constituencies start to come together and merge and put together a voting bloc that will be arguably one of the most diverse voting blocs in totality in our nation's history. And I think that is largely because of Kamala Harris and what she brings to the table.
You open the door to our full conversation today, which is going to really focus on Black men. We have been hearing that Black voters in general are a critical voting bloc for Democrats. Democrats can't win without Black voters. And now, especially as we're hitting this last stretch, the focus has really been on Black male voters. And I think we've seen a little bit from former President Trump trying to reach Black men. He has an interesting way of doing it. His was, we saw sneakers. We saw him come out and talk about his legal troubles somehow.
That's pandering in our community.
I appreciate that. So we see him saying things or trying in his way to indicate that he wants to speak to Black men. We've seen him on the trail with Senator Tim Scott, Representative Byron Donalds, who in and of themselves are interesting characters. I think objectively we can all say that. And then on the flip side to that, we do see the vice president as well, really talking about wanting to reach Black men. We heard her at her NABJ interview saying she's not taking any vote for granted, and that she doesn't think that just because she is Black, she deserves Black voters' ballots. So I guess just before we get into sort of the candidates themselves and what they're doing, I mean, how important are Black men in this year's election?
Well, Black voters are the most consequential, dedicated, and loyal voting bloc in the history of this country. Election after election, we've proven that. And with Black men, you can win with us, but you can damn sure lose without us. And we've seen that. In 2016, we had 13% of Black men vote against the most qualified person to ever run for the office and vote for the most unqualified person to ever think about the office. And we lost that election. And not only did we lose that election, we lost generations of progress because the former president was able to put three extremists on the nation's highest court, 200 plus individuals on the lower courts, and really give a license to extremism, racism, bigotry, hate, white nationalism, and Christian white nationalism in this country, and empower those individuals in such a way that our parents and grandparents will probably tremble in their grave if they knew what we were having to face. And so when I fast forward the tape and I think about the importance of this election, I will look you in your face virtually and tell you that Black men are casting a generational vote. But it's going to be critical that we as Democrats and the vice president and all of us who are ambassadors for the cause earn the trust of Black men and then earn the vote. Because in our community, our votes are clearly a demonstration of our trust. There's no doubt in my mind she is far better than the former president on everything in this race, including the issues that directly impact Black men. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have been bojangling around about their efforts to instruct, guide, or recruit African American men. They have no interest in doing that whatsoever. In 4 years in the Trump White House, where the receipts, as we say in our community, are available for all of us, prove that he has no interest in doing anything for good when it comes to Black men. The fact that he thinks that the way to court us or court our vote is to talk about a convicted felon. Well, let me just remind everyone and the former president, Antjuan Seawright, a 39-year-old Black man from rural South Carolina, could, if I were a convicted felon, could not apply for a job in the federal government. Sure as hell would not be able to run the federal government. So it's a conversation that's very fluent and privileged when we hear Donald Trump talk at and talk about his support for Black men, but certainly does not offer anything from a policy perspective for the Black family unit, where the Black man is a pivotal component of that. And if you compare that to what Vice President Harris has done throughout her career, whether it's as a prosecutor, where she offered expungement programs and opportunities for Black men who may have made a mistake in their life, for them not to be just another number in the system, whether as Attorney General, partnerships and opportunities across the state of California to prevent us from going to prison or going to jail and spending time in jail more so than others who commit similar offenses or criminal offenses, whether it's her time as vice president, where she arguably worked with President Biden to deliver the most consequential and comprehensive agenda for Black America in the history of this country. And Black men are certainly included in a large way in that. And even as a United States Senator, her efforts and the legislation she was able to advocate for and push have proven that she's on the right side of history when it comes to expand the opportunities and the progress for Black men in this country.
And so what I want to ask you, because you spoke about the need to speak to policy, and that that might not be something that we're seeing from Donald Trump. What in the conversations you're having, in the polls that you're watching, what are some of these policies, the top issues, I guess, Black men want to hear the candidates addressing, saying that they're going to take under their belt, deal with if they win?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because Black men care about more than just criminal justice reform in the criminal justice system. Somehow or another, we get pegged with that as if we're a one-legged stool or one-trick ponies. We only care about criminal justice. That's bullshit. The fact of the matter is, we care about an economic bill of health. We care about healthcare. We care about education. We care about an environment that we that's cleaner and greener and better than we found it. We care about all the things that every other constituency care about. The unfortunate part, there's some in this country, the right-wing extremists, who've hijacked the Republican Party, who try to put us in a box and think we only care about issues like criminal justice. When the fact of the matter is, I want the same things that white men want. I want the same benefits that white women have. I want to have the same access to opportunity that Hispanics and every other constituency have. And that's what this election is all about. And there is one candidate who's offered, I think, a policy agenda and a policy solution that keeps us on track with progress. If you look at what she's done, whether it's $100 billion to save Black and brown businesses during the pandemic, well, Black men own businesses too, whether it's the $17.5 billion that went towards historical Black colleges and universities, whether it was the $40 billion to keep us in our homes during the pandemic and help with utilities, or whether it was just simply putting shots in our arms when the other side was saying that we should take bleach and the pandemic was not real. Black men and Black people were dying at higher clips than every other constituency. And then if you think about gun violence in this country, an issue that's plagued our communities a lot differently than others. Well, she co-led the effort to make certain that the Safer in Communities Act, in a bipartisan way, passed the Congress, became into law, opened an Office of Gun Violence Prevention, and now we see violent crimes coming down in this country. When you think about infrastructure, and the fact is not just roads, bridges, and airports, but access to the internet, so we can have learning and meaningful conversations like this. Well, Black men care about that too. And $80 billion that go towards replacing lead pipes in our communities. We want clean drinking water too, because we don't want another young Antjuan Seawright born with asthma and some of the other traditional things that Black men are born with in this country as a direct result of environmental things. And then if you look at some of the things that we don't talk about enough as Democrats or as Black men or Black people, the fact that more Black Americans have health insurance than ever before. We care about accessible and affordable health care. The fact that more Black people have started businesses in this country. Well, Black men are entrepreneurs too. In fact, that's what the barbershop experience is all about. I was an entrepreneur at a young age, called myself mowing grass and mowing lawns in my community. The fact we have the lowest Black unemployment on record in the history of this country, 2.2 million jobs for Black Americans. All those things matter. And then if you look at the price of insulin coming down at $35 a month, there are Black men who are impacted by diabetes, whether it's directly or indirectly. We care about the fact that prescription drugs will be capped at $2,000 a year for our grandparents and some of our parents. That matters because that's pressure off of our wallets. And then if you look at the biggest lie that's floating in the Black community among Black men, the fact that because of Kamala Harris leading with Joe Biden, we cut Black child poverty in half with the child tax credit, and that $1,400 check per child per household, that mattered to us because it helped us during a time of need. And those are things that she has led on. And then if you look at broadly and our role in the Black family unit, the fact that more Black women are on our nation's courts than all other presidents combined, that means something, because those are people who look like our mothers and sisters and daughters. And then future forward and future leaning, the fact that we care about owning a home, but the barriers to entry are critical and sometimes larger and stronger for us. So that $25,000 down payment assistance, that matters to us. Capping the price of childcare at 7% of our income, that matters. Not allowing medical debt to be a barrier of entry and not allowing that to be on our credit report, that matters. $50,000 for a startup business, small business, all those things matter. And so sometimes we have to talk about those policies and figure out how they directly impact our lives. Now, that does not mean that we do not have work to do, but we've made progress, not perfection. We've made progress. And I think this election should be summarized with this: progress is not permanent. And in one election, all the progress we made can be taken away.
Antoine, you said something I want to take a moment to delve into, which is when we look at the number of Black female judges that have been appointed to courts, and of course, you know, the number one judge that's been appointed that we would all think of would be Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first Black woman to serve on the Supreme Court. You know, I have to ask because I think we were hearing former President Obama sending a very strong message to Black men, especially. We're hearing from other Black male figures saying, you know, now is not the time to sit back and say, I'm not going to vote for a woman and I'm not going to vote for a Black woman. Is that a concern that you're hearing in conversations that you're having, in any sort of research that you're doing, that somehow Black men will not support Kamala Harris because of her gender?
Well, Cheyanne, I'm Black, I'm 39, I'm from the South, and I'm a Democrat. I'm never worried, but I'm always concerned. Because if you're not concerned, that means you're arrogant. I'm concerned because we're not a monolith as a Black community. I'm concerned because misinformation, disinformation, where I'm from down south, we call it lies, are intentionally targeting us at higher rates than other constituencies. And I'm concerned that the MAGA extremist microphone has been so loud that they feel like they're making some Black men in this country feel like our votes have not been worth the journey. And I would admit that the pace of progress has been slower in many cases for us, and the wheels of progress may not turn as fast for us. But voting is an exercise. We don't go to the barbershop as Black men, get our haircuts one time and think that's going to end our issues. The same way we do not mow our grass one Saturday morning or Friday evening and think that our grass is not going to grow again. We have to be consistent and aggressive in our pursuit to protect the progress that has been made. That's why you see people like Barack Obama, myself, Chairman Jamie Harrison, Jim Clyburn, and I can name so many others, Anthony Anderson, John Legend, and others, going out being ambassadors for good and for progress and for the future of this country. Take partisan politics out of it. Take Kamala Harris and Donald Trump out of it. Black men in particular have always been pro-value, anti-institution. So this is not about the Democratic Party, and this is not about one election. This is about the future of our community, because this election will impact our community and the Black family unit in ways that it will not impact others. And that's why when you think about Trump's Project 2025, and you compare that to all the things I mentioned to you earlier, that's why you see President Obama reminded Black men all across this country that this election is not one to second guess what we know is a must, not a plus. And be clear, Kamala Harris needs us. The country needs us. The world is depending on us. And every major social movement in this country has been fueled by the Black press, the Black church, Black women, young folks, but also Black men. And this movement that we're in that will determine the next 46 to 100 years in this country is depending on us to show up in the right manner.
So then is the concern over Black men not wanting to vote for a Black woman, or just a woman, taking race out of it, but just the idea of a woman in general, is that something that, are we blowing that out of proportion? Is that not really a real concern?
I'm sure there are some who feel that way. And I'm sure there are some who feel like my vote does not matter. And I'm sure there's some who feel like I've been voting for Democrats and I have not yielded the results as fast or as aggressive as I want to. And I'm not dismissing any feelings, in particular the feelings of a Black man, because I feel your pain. I feel your frustration. I am there with you. I struggle with the same struggles you struggle with. The difference between me and some who feel that way is I understand the value of my vote and the value of my voice. And I damn sure are not going to misuse it. And sure as hell, I am not going to vote for a group of people who want to turn back the clocks of progress to a place where people who look like me do not even matter, where they want to dissolve the family unit and in many cases pit Black women versus black men and black men versus black women, the old divide and conquer strategy. But we've seen that for generations in our community, and we can't fall into that trap. And sure, they're going to advertise black men on the Republican side and say, well, life is better on this side of the fence. But all skin folk and kin folk, and just because you look like me does not mean you represent my interests in the best way. What I can tell you is the life experiences of Kamala Harris and Coach Walz. And I don't know a black man in this country who has not been inspired in some way, shape, or form by a coach and a teacher, regardless of everything else. And so between Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, I feel like they are reflective of our values as Americans, but also as black men and black people.
And so on that, I have to ask because when I think about this has been a very contentious election, in part because of some of the rhetoric that we are hearing. I think, and I'm always very careful. I don't always enjoy repeating some of the comments that we have heard, but we have heard racist comments directed toward the vice president's claim that she would be a DEI hire, a DEI president. Of course, we have also heard some phrases somehow that she slept her way to the top, although I don't know how you sleep with millions of people to get to be vice president of the United States, but that's a different conversation. I mean, is this rhetoric that we're hearing, is this impacting black men when they're looking at who to cast their ballots for this year?
I pray not, because DEI is simply the 2024 word for some in this country as the N word. They replaced the N word with DEI because it's more attractive to use. It's not as offensive on the surface. But those of us who know our history and know their history understand what they mean when they say the DEI candidate. And the fact is, when you hear this right wing, red meat, radical, racial rhetoric about Kamala Harris, I think every black man should see this from the lens of they are talking about our mothers. They're talking about our sisters. They're talking about our aunts and our grandmothers and our great aunts and all those women who've been nurturing and blossoming and grooming us to be in a position to do what we're doing now. And so I take personal offense to that. I lost my 21-year-old niece last year in a horrific one-car accident. Benedict college student on her way to graduating very, very soon. And so when I look at Vice President Harris, and every time I see her get out of that black SUV or pull up to a speech or just on a TV interview or whatever it is, it's a reminder for me that I have an obligation to protect that sister, but to stand with that sister. Because I would want every black man, whether they know me or not, to do the same for my mother, my sister, and I'm damn sure if my niece was here, would want them to do that for my niece. So this election should be personal for every black man, because we've never had the opportunity to have a woman who looks like our mothers be the leader of the free world. That all by itself shows how much progress we've made. But November 5th, that progress and the potential of that progress can be wiped out if we do not do our part. So history is depending on us once again.
And I want to stick very, very briefly, one more question on Black men, Black women. We know numbers show that Black women turn out more than Black men. What do you think is the driving factor for that? And how, or what is it that we have to say to Black men this year to say your vote matters, you need to get out and cast your vote for whomever, but hit that poll, hit that ballot box?
Well, I want to thank Black women for what they continue to do to help save our democracy and save this country and elevate the voices of our community. But that just means that we have work to do in the Black community to make sure that Black men are on par with Black women. And so I think what we have to do is meet them where they are. And I know that's cliche and a traditional statement, but that may not always mean at a rally. It may not always mean coming to meet me where at this event. Maybe we have to go to where they are. Maybe we have to go to the spades table. Maybe we have to go to the barbershop. Maybe we have to go to the fraternity meeting. Maybe we have to go to the gym. Maybe we have to go to the rec league. Maybe we have to go to the hole in the wall. Maybe we have to go to the happy hour. Wherever it is, I think we have to find Black men and meet them where they are with a message that makes sense for where they want to be. When I talk to Black men around this country, I talk to them from the lens of not that I'm better than you, or not that I'm talking at you. I want to talk to you because we may look like each other, we may have similar life experiences, but our interests may be different. And so I want to find out what's important to you. And I'll tell you what the policy is that overlaps what's important to you. And from there, we can yell in the places we agree and whisper in the places we disagree. And I think that's what we have to learn as a party. And look, the extremists who are over targeting Black men online with misinformation and disinformation, they have a rhythm and they have a rhyme. As Democrats and as people for ambassadors for good, we can't get surrounded and drowned by the foolishness that is being targeted online. We have to strike back. If it's hand-to-hand combat, if it's airstrikes, whatever it is, we've got to meet the moment and we've got to meet folks where they are. And that especially means Black men, young and the not so young, and every other constituency that falls under the Black men umbrella. And Cheyanne, one of the consistent things I hear from Black men around the country is that the Democrats do not present strong. They don't present the case of strong. Well, I don't know how much strong you can get when I look at the journey of Kamala Harris. I don't know how much strong you can get when I look at the journey of Governor Tim Walz. I don't know how strong you can get when you look at the potential of electing the first African-American speaker in the history of this country, a Black man who happens to be a member of Kappa Alpha Psi, and Hakeem Jeffries from Brooklyn, New York, or the next potential assistant speaker, Joe Neguse, a 40-year-old Black man from Denver, Colorado. I don't know how much stronger you can present because these people are not just politicians spinning around in their chairs. They are people who understand the experiences of Antjuan and every other Black man in this country, and they're working towards making certain that we close this gap between the have and the have-nots.
One thing I want to ask your opinion on, I did an article recently on young Black voters and how they seem to be overwhelmingly leaning toward supporting Vice President Harris. But within that, we're also seeing some numbers of a little bit of a generational divide, specifically among Black men. And you are a young Black man, you are 39, and it is those who are under 50 who seem to say that they are trending more toward Donald Trump, while those over 50 are saying they are trending more toward Kamala Harris. Do you think that there is a reason for this generation gap? Is it coming down to who's being targeted with misinformation, lack of education? I mean, what could be the reason for that gap?
Oh, I think there are a million and one reasons, and I don't claim as if I speak for all Black men, but I do speak to them, a lot of them, and I have for a very long time, doing my little Black job. And what I would tell you is that you hear different things from different people. But the one consistent thing I think I hear is, I'm not sure what my vote has gotten me. I'm not sure I'm valued. And that's why my party has to spend this election and every other election reminding folks of their value, their network, and their net worth. I think my party has to spend time, if we want to continue to win elections in this country, differentiating the policy differences and pointing out the extremism that comes from the other side. And I don't mean in the Washington, D.C. K Street terms. I mean in the terms that we speak about on my street, because elections are won on my street. Strategy and bojangling happens on K Street. And that's where we have to find the disconnect and pull together the two of them to make certain we're meeting folks where they are with a simplified message that makes sense. I live by this, Cheyanne. Every time I show up anywhere, I don't care what the audience is, it's always based off KISS. Keep it simple, Seawright. Because Black men in particular, or just human beings, we run away from what we don't understand or what we fear. And so it's easier to be angry than it is informed. It's easier to vote against something than it is to be for something. We've got to give Black men a reason to vote for Kamala Harris. And in that, they will vote against Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and their Project 2025.
One thing that I think nobody can deny is that, especially July 21st, when we saw that ticket change, when we saw the vice president become, I mean, she wasn't officially the nominee at that point, but it was pretty clear we were all, everybody was going to rally behind her. And we saw an excitement start that I don't think anybody was expecting. And we saw, as you mentioned, she's raised like $1 billion in 100 days. I don't think that's something any of us ever thought would happen for any candidate. And I think about the DNC and the excitement that was there and the roll call, which even Republicans admit it, that's way more fun than what we gave America. And there's just this sense of so much joy in this moment, I think. I want to get your reaction when you saw that ticket change, if there was any surprise, if you felt any of that excitement, but what is the reason behind that excitement? What does Kamala Harris bring to an election that, frankly, Joe Biden wasn't bringing for voters?
Well, it was emotional, and I call it Kamala Mentum, is what I think the world's experiencing. But when I saw her on that DNC stage accepting our party's nomination, the only thing I can think about was Big and Smalls. It was all a dream. Because I don't think anyone in their right mind had the audacity to think that it would happen this quickly and in this way. And so it was certainly a dream for all of us. But energy is good, and I appreciate all the energy. But energy has to be harnessed, and it has to be focused, and it has to be used with good intention, because not all energy is good. And energy will not last if you do not use it for good and keep recreating energy and building off of that. And that's what the next 20 some odd days and a wake up is all about. And look, we may have 99 problems in the Democratic Party, but voting for Kamala Harris should never not be one. Should not be one. Quoting that hip hop philosopher Jay-Z on that, because she represents everything that this party is all about. And in reality, she's a dream merchant for us. A former prosecutor, former attorney general, former United States senator, sitting vice president, HBCU grad, member of the Link. Any other scenario where that person is running for anything, game over. And so we have to look at it from that lens. Game over. Just on qualifications alone, game over. And then if you add the fact that from a policy perspective, she wants to do for us what hasn't been done for us and build on the progress that's been made in this country. And you compare that to this morally bankrupt party who doesn't give two flying kites about the future of our community, it should not even be a question.
That is something very similar that I had Congressman Stephen Horsford say to me when I spoke to him, which is, Black men are not a monolith. Black men, like everybody else, are allowed to have different opinions. But at the end of the day, when you compare the candidates and who has done the most for not just Black men, but for Black Americans, for the Black community, the congressman said there's really no question as to who we should be voting for. And so I have to ask you my final question. I saw this article the other day, and I really wish that I could remember what news outlet it was. It was an opinion piece that said Black men will decide this year's election. Is that something that you think is true? Will Black men be the deciding vote casters for this year's president of the United States?
Look, I wrote this in 2019. I said that Black men will be a deciding voting bloc in elections to come. And I think that's true. It was true in 2020. I think it's true in 2024. And that's why I say Black men are the most consequential vote in this election and in elections to come, because our net worth continues to grow as Republicans court us and Democrats need us. And so we are going to be a very decisive voting bloc in this election. And that's why we have to take our votes very, very serious and use them for good.
And I actually lied to you. I actually want to pick your brain very quickly on one last thing. When I'm looking at all of the new positions that we could see, of course, Vice President Harris could become the first Black female, first Asian, first female to be president of the United States. I think about obviously Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, Corinne Jean-Pierre. I think about Hakeem Jeffries and the history that he made and could make. Again, I think about the Senate. We could have two Black women sitting on the Senate at the same time,
And
first
Black
ever.
Colin Allred from Texas.
Yes. And this, there's so much history. I feel like Black Americans are on the precipice of making. Curious just in for you, if this is, we heard before, about the year of the woman. Is this the year of Black America?
Certainly there's a potential. We've always heard growing up in the Black church that the last shall be first. So, my uncle preached a sermon one time I'll never forget. When it's your time and your turn, there's not anything in the world can separate you from what's destined to be for you. And we've earned our place in history. So it's our rightful time to ascend. And that's why Black men have the ability to give the first woman of color the biggest political promotion that the world has ever seen. It's on us.
Well, Antjuan Seawright, thank you so much for joining us on the Switch Up. Thank you always for answering my call. I just want everybody to know Antjuan will take my call anytime. Does not matter if I am on a 5-minute deadline or a 1-week deadline. So always thank you so much for your insight, for your passion. Just really appreciate you.
Well, Cheyanne, I said this earlier, but I'll say this again. The Black press is so important for the fertilization of this country. And you represent all the things that our ancestors probably dreamed about when it comes to making certain we have reflective representation in the right places so the right news can get to the right people in such a way that we can digest it. So I appreciate what you do.
Thank you. I think I have to go cry now. Um, that is such high praise. Thank you so, so much. We will definitely be talking again soon. I know, again, this election is like tomorrow, but at the same time, so far away. But I know it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks.
Well, it was a marathon, now it's a full-blown sprint. So
It is.
the team that's in the best shape is going to win. So here we run.
Yes, yes. And I forgot to mention, I did see you. I think it was the evening of the debate. I did see you. I think you were, was it MSNBC? You were speaking. Yeah, I did see that. And I almost texted you. I was like, no, he's on air. There's no way he's gonna but yeah, so I'm sure we're going to be talking again soon. We had originally planned for this to air next week. We might be holding it and going forward with our Black women episode next week.
Well, all the conversation is around Black men this week.
This is all around Black men right now. And so that's what, unfortunately, we do have to do this thing called journalistic integrity. So I have to get both sides. So we are waiting to hear back from a few more people. But I'm hoping actually to be able to speak with Terrence Woodbury, who I love. He also always answers my calls. But as soon as it does go up, I'll be sure we will let you know. We're
Let me
going
know.
to will go with it as well. The article might come out actually early next week, and then the podcast will follow. But whatever it is, I'll be sure that you get everything.
That's good.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Antjuan.
Thank you for having me.
Take care.